See, and the surrender is a sign. The surrender is a sign of how free you are, how centered you are. Because you see, it's called surrender that's no surrender. Because if you think you got something to give up, you're still stuck in the wrong place. You're holding on so tight to something. Holding on so tight. I mean, I dig that there are Buddhas in this Western society that we will only know when we are pure enough to know them, and what they will turn out to be is the shoe clerk and the mailman and the bus driver, and they will be people who have any possible role in life. You won't be able to tell them from their role. Some of them will come in gray suits and they'll be on Madison Avenue. Some of them will be the junk collector, and some of them will be the grocery store man, and you won't know them because you're not receiving them. And when you are higher and higher, you will see that you will respond by finding the forces in the environment that determine what your thing is. And if your thing is art, you will be the purest, most conscious artist. And if your thing is motherhood, you will be the purest and most conscious mother. And if your thing is the business world, you will be the most conscious business being. And you can't tell me that any external act in and of itself is immoral per se. It is only the immorality in the person who does it. And the whole hype in child psychology that I used to be part of was we would do these big studies for NIMH determining whether if you beat a child at 3 months or beat him at 6 months, it makes a difference. Fact of the matter is, it's who beats him. It's not the external act. It's not the external act. It's not the external act that counts. As I've said before, you can say no to somebody, you can say no to your parents in such a way that they end up loving you more for it. And until you can figure out how to do that, you're still too attached. Because you're still into there's me and there's them. But when I walk up and Dad's wallpapering, I'm wallpapering at that moment. It may only last 30 seconds, but we are wallpaperness, doingness. That's what we are. We are an existential thing at this moment. This is a very, very difficult stage most of us are in now. It's an intermediate phase between dream and reality. It's like that place at night where you've been deeply asleep and then you come into dreams, and then from dream you're just waking up. And you're somewhere in between that place. The dream's still going on and you're still dreaming. Desire, attachment, worldly pull, who you are. I am traveling across the country. I am a teacher. I am a student. I am Buddha. All these labels, that's the dream. You're still dreaming, but you know the alarm clock went off. And is the alarm clock part of the dream, or is it part of waking up? You're not quite sure yet. You're right at that place. You know that place? Because the alarm clock fits so neatly into the dream. Fits so neatly into the dream, because just then a bell was called for. It's all teachers everywhere. All teachers. If you can hear the message. Look at every being you meet as your teacher. They are all God in some form, some incarnation, and the reason that you are seeing them in that form rather than merely as God is because they still have something to teach you. That's the definition of the teacher, is that you perceive them. Isn't the system beautiful? You don't have to waste your time meeting all the beings that have nothing to teach you. Because you don't even know of their existence. It's so perfect. It's like somebody that goes into town. Kirpal Singh said in one of the lectures I remember hearing on tape, he said, when I go into a town and I haven't broken the law, he said, the courts and the police stations and all don't exist for me. Funny place. It's interesting, isn't it? And I've been watching that in myself, how as I change my game, how the entire universe around me of what's figure and what's ground. What stands out, what comes into consciousness. There was a time when my desire was to be a hippie leader. And all I do is walk down the street and I could see old people, young people, pretty people, ugly people, sexy people, not, but all I saw was hippies. The hippie a block and a half away and 500 people between me and that hippie, but my head would be connected with that hippie. Imagine all the Buddhas I passed by. Because they didn't come in the long hair variety. And then as that attachment fell away, then the more subtle teachers I could start to hear. And then there were teachers who previously I hadn't noticed because they were quieter teachers, because they were teaching desires that were more subtle attachments in me. It's just like, do you see how when Buddha met the old man, the sick man, the dead man, you see how he learned about his own attachments, his own craving, his own desire? The more you purify, the more you burn out all of the attachments that keep you selectively perceiving, the more centered you get, the higher the beings that can come to you. Because the more you're ready to receive them. Because higher beings represent greater force fields around you. See? In other words, if you can only pick up on a higher being is sending you a complex message that comes on like 3 or 4 levels simultaneously. If you're only receiving at one level, you don't receive enough. I mean, this is all. I have a little thing under my guru's picture. It says, seeing his slightest signal across the heads of the throng, hearing his faintest whisper above earth's loudest song, which is a kind of a heavy, poetic type of, thing. And sometimes I know that right in this is the message. He's speaking to me right here, but if I can only see this one, I can't decipher the message because I'm too caught in your form and your form and your form. And there's Dan and there's Sue and there's Eric and so on. Now, if I can get back one level and one level and one level and still keep this one going, as I get to more and more levels, his message gets clearer to me. What his will is becomes clearer, because I'm not caught in the discriminata, the discriminable things that are catching me at one level of thought. So there are messages, at these kinds of messages, not necessarily, see, people would say, well, I got a message from an astral being. That's only one other frequency. There are lots of beings who send at one frequency or another to it. And always you say, yeah, and that one too. Sure, and that one too. Sure, and that one too. And you just, every time you say, and that one too, it frees you and opens you to another one. And that one too. And that one too. Right, of course, and that one too. Right. And the calmer you get and the more centered you get, the more you hear it all be over the heads of the throng and be beyond Earth's loudest song. Many of you have worked with inner sounds in your head and have gotten to the place where you can be in a noisy thoroughfare and suddenly it's all deathly still. Have you ever been in that place? Where you're in an inner space and there's all this noise going around and yet you're not hearing anything. You're like in a completely calm space in the center of it. At that point you have, the noise is going on, you're aware of the noise going on, but you're in a perfectly silent place. Many people flip in and out of that a lot. That's an easy one to get access to, I think. Well, that's a place where you have extricated yourself from your sense of hearing, from the attachment to your own ears. The ears are still doing their thing, but you're in another psychic space, another sound space. Now there's a place in the model of well, I'll just sort of let it all flow. Which in some ways seems to be licensed to let it all go to hell. And you've got to understand, you've got to realize that letting it all flow means being able to hear all the messages, including it going to hell. I've got to point out the awesome fact that when you are fully conscious, you cannot do anything but His will all the time. You can't do anything but the most perfect optimum response. And you don't sit around wondering, did I do the wrong thing or the right thing? Because you're not doing it, and it's just happening. It is happening through you. It is happening through you. Through you. Through you. Not because of you, but through you. Because if I do something that creates a certain kind of a vibration in another person, I know that ultimately I'm living in a place where ultimately all that is always going to be here, because I believe I am living. I don't believe it. I am living in the eternal present. It's all here and it's always going to be here. And that look of fear, or that look of anger, or that look of hurt, or that hurtness, or anger, or all those things that lie behind that, they're all still here. You don't go away by turning your back. There's nowhere you can go. And that all is part of the eternal present, and that's all part of what determines your response at any moment. You begin to, when you get calmer, you're not only living in your present, the present includes the past and the future as well. And the obvious outcome of all your acts becomes so apparent to you. It becomes so apparent how the acts lead, how that everything in the universe is related to everything else, and the relation of cause and effect. Once you see that you are completely involved in a web of total interdeterminacy, then all you can do is surrender into it. Because everything was an illusion. It was an illusion to think that you weren't in the first place. So the surrender happens, which is a falling away of that illusion that you had choice at that level. You had choice. Not my, but thy will sounds like you have a choice. All you have is more or less illusion. When you are in the illusion, you think there is a choice. When you finish the illusion, you see that it wasn't anyway. It was all the will of God. It was all determined. It was all causal. It was all lawful. It was all karmic unfolding. It's all the same thing. I'm saying the same thing. It was all higher consciousness. The script's already been written. And he sat on page 23, and he sat deciding what he would do next after he left New Hampshire. Well, just turn to page 24. What did he do? Can't turn to page 24? Why not? Well, you're too busy deciding on page 23. See, when you can stand back far enough, you see him deciding on page 23, and you see the decision that was made on page 24, and you see how that all comes out on page 25, and then you're still on page 23 making the decision. You dig that? You see how that is? Is that too confusing for you? Too confusing for you? Have faith. That's a cop-out. Shouldn't have asked if it was too confusing, if I didn't want to deal with the fact that somebody might find it so. See, every difference you may find between you and another human being is merely the trap of your attachment. Because you've got to remember there is a place behind that where you both are. And if you were in it, they would be in it when they are with you. If you were in it pure enough. Pure enough. Although the next moment, when they turn away from you, they may be back in their drama again. When they're with you, they are in the place where your head has created them to be. It's very far out. When Christ kisses Judas, at that point, Judas is kissing God, and he is one with God, and at the next moment, he's back being Judas living out the plot. Because that is his karma, which Christness sees, obviously. This has got to be done. This is the way the story comes out. Go do your thing. One of you will betray me. It's got to be done. That's the way it's going to happen. No choices. Hakuin, the Japanese Zen poet, says, your going out and returning is nowhere but where you are. That means all of your going and coming will seem like going and coming if that's where you're at. If, on the other hand, you're at one plane farther out, you see there is no going and coming. Where can we go? Where can we go? Where can we go? But in order to hear the question, where can we go, you have got to appreciate the triviality of your own individual ego predicament. Because when I can meet somebody and love them fully and at the same moment never care whether I see them again, the only way that happens is when I feel the same way about my own trip as I do about theirs. I mean, I don't care if I don't see me again. And I don't care how my trip comes out. I do what I do because that's what I do. I do sadhana because there's nothing else I can do. Because at the degree of illusion I am in, and at the degree of ignorance I have seen through, it's the only thing that is available to do. And what sadhana consists of is what it consists of. At this moment it consists of saying what it consists of. And who I am, and whether I'm getting enlightened, and how soon it'll happen, and it's all fun and games. Nine-tenths of the things you think are just more stuff, just traps. Well, the other tenth is too, but I'm leaving you a way out, a loophole. You can think about God, supposedly. Now, what you do is you develop a set of devices to help you keep that center and keep deepening it so that you can use the environment. For example, I take the Gita every morning and I read one shloka sometimes. This can only take 5 minutes sometimes. You just read one shloka, one little phrase. And then I take my entire day and I flip through all the things that I've said I'd do today. And I run them through that shloka. It only takes a minute to do that. And then the next morning, I've got the next shloka, but before I go to the next one, I take that one that I did yesterday, and I reread it and run yesterday through that one I did yesterday. And I notice how many times I forgot. Then I do the next one for the next day. It only takes about 5 minutes. It's another technique of centering, finding your way back home. Mantra. Getting a mantra going. So that you are always in this place from which you see your attachments, your own drama. Meditation. Having a puja table in your house, having a little corner of your room or your truck or whatever it is you're living in that is designed specifically for spiritual work. And when you sit down in that, you don't bring any of your bills, your worldliness. You clean up, you go sit down, you light your candle, and you sit at your puja table, and you have a few beings who understand how it is to hang around with. On this particular one, there's Meher Baba in 2 of his manifestations, and Maharaji and Ram and Maharaji and Haridas Baba. That seems to be the cats who are hanging around here. And they're the fellas, right? They're the fellas. And this is a little room where they hang out, and I come in and I hang out with them. It's like, you just go in and get your head straight by hanging out with some groovy cats for a few minutes. See? And you come in, you say, Maharaji, I'm sorry, I can only stay a minute. I've got a very busy day. And he sits there like, right, of course. Yeah. And then busy day happens. Because he says, go do your busy day, but stay here. That's his invitation. Say, you mean you thought you had to do the busy day? Don't be silly. I mean, I'm just hanging out here and it's all happening. I mean, you can drive a car and talk at the same time. You all know that. What makes you think you can't hang out with Maharaj and at the same time do whatever you had to do all day? Traps, devices, all devices. Puja tables, mantras, malas. Some of you will find it very easy to keep up the programs you've started on, the programs of asanas and pranayam, and some of you will find that they just stop very quickly because you weren't in deep enough to them. You were doing them still for the wrong reasons. So what happens is you start to stop and your body starts to get all kind of weird and your breath gets kind of freaky. And now you notice it. Well, before you ever started those things, you never noticed it. It's another one of those things where, you know, a little waking from ignorance is a reasonably horrible thing. Before you didn't know how you were suffering. Now you see how terrible your body is. And pretty soon it drags you into getting your body straight. You start to look around for opportunities to find somebody who'll beat you with a stick to get you to do your asanas. At the same moment, seeing the horror of the fact that you still need somebody to beat you with a stick to do the asana. And all you do is look with disbelief and say, oh, well, that's where I'm at. Pretty horrible, isn't it? And then you say, look at him saying pretty horrible, isn't it? And you go through all this stuff on and on and on and on and on. And this is the process. This is the process. And the process goes on and on and on until the process is done. And it's an inevitability, and there's nothing you got to do about it. Do what you do. You want to leave here and go to the Hilton and take a big soft pad and order a steak and take a bath and have an orgy and stay stoned for 10 weeks and, wow, sure, man, because here we are. There's Maharaji and Meher Baba and Ram, and we're all hanging out with you. Sure, here we all are, because that's you. That's a place in you now, and you know that place. And you just can't buy off, appease that place in your own consciousness. Once you've seen your own hype, forget it. For a moment, you may be able to drug it out of existence, but it'll come back. Hanuman really represents a very high trip, I'll tell you. The trip of service. Everybody, you do whatever they need. I have a friend, Steve Durkee. When he needed money, he was an artist. And he would go to a fish store, and he would say, he'd talk to them, and he'd see that there was a level in them where they dug the beauty of the fish. And then he'd say, can I paint your fish store for you? And he would paint the fish store, and he would make the fish store into such a temple. And he'd have the fish in the middle of mandalas and huge crabs that were the highest possible manifestation of divine form. And people would come from miles around just to dig the beauty of that fish store, and it became a temple. And it changed the whole nature of the consciousness of all the beings in it. And at the same moment he was doing the spiritual work, he was honoring God. Buddha says right livelihood, right livelihood.